Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
The 2024 Indigenous Media Conference, organized by Indigenous Journalists Association, took place from July 25 to 27 in Oklahoma City, United States. The event brought together Indigenous journalists, media professionals, and experts from around the world to discuss and address the pressing issues faced by Indigenous media practitioners. The conference also provided an opportunity to celebrate their contributions and achievements. Cultural Survival was also present at this landmark event and asked Indigenous journalists to share their experiences, challenges, and successes in covering Indigenous communities and their efforts in collaborating for Indigenous rights.
My name is Jodi Rave Spotted Bear. I'm the founder and director of the Indigenous Media Freedom Alliance. We also have our own online news site called Buffalo's Fire. And the reason that I actually started this news organization is because the mainstream press traditionally overlooks our stories, and we have really good, important stories to tell. And we have a host of educators in our own community that are working to overcome the high dropout rate, and this is due to this ongoing systemic racism, institutional racism within our education systems. So it's stories like that. You have to put a human face on these. So look to the people who actually have answers in your communities that the mainstream press won't tell those stories. So it's really important for local news to exist. We have way too many news deserts throughout Indian country. In all minority or ethnic groups, we need these local media outlets. And it's been said over and over again today that if we're not telling our stories, who is going to tell those stories? But who's better to tell those stories than people who really understand what the problems are and what the issues are and have that relationship with people who are in the community. So one of the issues that comes up repeatedly with ethnic, minority, racial groups around the world is that media is needed so we can preserve our languages, use our languages, keep our languages alive. And what better way to do that is through the media. However, here in the United States, for example, we have probably more endangered languages than we have vibrant living languages. And again, on my reservation, the Fort Berthold Reservation in North Dakota, we have the Mandan language, the Hidatsa language, and the Arikara language. All of them are endangered. And every day we see one more elder who's a fluent speaker die. So, there is some hope with Language Nest and these efforts to keep the languages going. But if you have an endangered language, you can't really have an immersion school because you don't have enough people to really sustain that particular program. So one of the recommendations, again, that needs to go before the relative to UNDRIP and Article 16 is that that particular article, says not only should we be amplifying Indigenous media, but we should use those languages to actually be able to tell those stories. But if our languages are dying or endangered or need to be revitalized, the government that destroyed our languages needs to come back and fix our languages and infuse money into these programs so we can save our languages and tell our stories in our languages. 24 years ago in 2000, I was with a group of international global journalists at the UN it was a workshop, a working group to talk about to talk about and identify the needs that we faced as global Indigenous journalists, and there were several recommendations that came out of that. But one of the recommendations was the establishment of journalism schools, and here we are 24 years later, and we don't have journalism schools within our tribal college system. And there's about 33 tribal colleges in the United States. There is one program at Haskell Indian Nations University, a communications program, but we need to get that messaging out there. And again, it's, it could be through grants or government funding that actually helps support our tribal colleges so we can create those new generations of storytellers. And to me, it almost seems a bit part of a flawed systemic system where why didn't they create this platform designed to where we could tell our own stories? That ability to be able to go into our communities and tell our stories has kind of been erased. It's part of the genocide of Indigenous peoples, where to act like we don't exist. But that's why journalism and media is so important, because we can and should be telling those stories, but we really have to ramp up funding to those programs and colleges so we can have a journalism school in every college in the country, every tribal college. Our languages and our journalism programs are so vitally important to the work that we do, and I hope that this is something that the UNESCO and people involved on the international level really pay attention to those particular issues so we can thrive as Indigenous peoples.
For more information on Indigenous rights, visit ces.org/rights, and also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook.